Welcome to the place where we learn about improv, 'cause public speaking can take you so far. Improvly speaking, say yes and flex your creative thinking. Improvly speaking, say yes and flex your creative thinking.
Welcome, everyone, to the Improvly Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Dana Gowan. I'm so excited that you're joining us today. For anyone new joining and listening in, thanks so much for checking in and checking it out. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people to try new things, get out of their heads, and find creative outlets and passions that work for them and help them. And also a little side goal of this podcast is to help people understand the benefits of improv and also applied improvisation. And on this podcast, I like to talk to a variety of guests with varying levels of improv experience, from experienced improvisers and artistic directors to people who've signed up for improv classes to help them in their professional life and personal life skills. And today's guest, well, you're in for a real treat, because today's guest may just be the world's greatest improviser, or at least that's the title that he's working with. And it's not far off. And he's also helping others to become the world's greatest improvisers as well. The world can have multiple greatest improvisers. There doesn't just have to be one. And he is helping others to become world's greatest improvisers too. Honestly, this guest today needs no introduction, but I'm going to give you his introduction because it is well-earned and well-deserved. So let me tell you about our amazing guest today, Will Hines. Will has been teaching long-form improv since 2004 at the Upright Citizens Brigade, or UCB Theatre, at both its New York and Los Angeles locations. He's published a best-selling book on improv called How to Be the Greatest Improviser on Earth. He's also a working comedic actor and has appeared on many TV shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Search Party, Broad City, Inside Amy Schumer, and most recently, Night Court on NBC. He's a frequent guest on podcasts. You might have heard him on Comedy Bang Bang, Improv for Humans, Hollywood Handbook, as well as the hundreds of podcasts he's produced himself. Currently, right now, he's working on Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About the Beatles, and Screw It, We're Just Going to Talk About Comics. And Screw It, today, we're just going to talk about improv, so this will be great. He's also the founder of World's Greatest Improv School, or WGIS, or Weegis, however you like to pronounce it. He's an amazing improviser and all-around nice dude. At least that's what his website says. Please welcome the amazing Will Hines.
Hello. Greetings.
Greetings. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
I appreciate you starting up the world's greatest improv school, WGIS, which we will talk about in a little bit. And I want to learn more about the journey in starting that. But we've got a few things first to talk about in the journey here. But Will, I have to kind of backtrack a bit, if you don't mind. I have a little fan moment. Okay. I need to just have a fan moment here. So June 2018, my husband, Steven, got a job out here and we were taking our relocation trip. Trying to find a place to live. We had 5 days to find a place to live here, which is a bit intense, a little bit like House Hunters, LA edition. And we ended up finding a place to live in 4 days. It took 4 days. So we had an extra day to kill, and it happened to be a Monday. So we're like, let's go see a show at UCB. And it was Herald Night, and the Smokes were playing. And it was you, Jim Woods, Dave Tooney, the three of you all, and then two females who I don't know who they were, but they were excellent. So the five of you all, and it was just magical. So I hadn't taken any improv classes. We were really into improv through Comedy Bang Bang, and we lived in Columbia, South Carolina, so there wasn't really any improv scene to take classes. And I think that was my first improv show in person, and you were
Oh,
there.
wow.
You were a part of my first
Oh,
improv show I saw.
oh, that's so cool. Thanks for telling me. I love hearing that. That's nice.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was a weird one or you all had the hour set. No, it was good, but like you all had the hour set, which I don't know was unusual, or you always had the hour
At that
for
time,
it.
we
But
had that. Yeah.
okay, because I think you all might have done a Herald. Being new, I didn't quite know what I was watching other than it was magic. And you might have done a Herald, but then I think you did a mono scene for the second half because you all were in a car for the
Right.
whole time. So it was probably a mono scene.
Yes. There's no way we did a Herald. The Smokes have veterans who are overdoing the Herald because they did the Herald too much when they were like up and coming.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
It was probably just to get a suggestion and go montage. And the second half, yeah, that sounds like a mono scene. And in particular, it sounds like a road trip, which is something that the Smokes do sort of like regularly. Like we just pretend to be in a car, and the whole set is us in the car. So yeah, that sounds like us.
Yeah, and it was so memorable. I still remember the suggestion. It was Balloon, and I think It Too was out at the time. So you all were pretending like you were driving to It Too for the second time and kind of recreating that like movie scene a bit. And you played a character named Barbara, and you were a fantastic Barbara, I have to tell you.
Oh, thank you.
So 5 years later, I still remember because it just was so memorable and magical. And I don't
Oh,
know. I just want to thank you for
that's
being
really,
a part of the
really,
journey.
that's really nice to hear. I appreciate it. I mean, the Smokes, my team are veterans and we're usually good, but it is certainly not beyond us to have an off show. Or even if it's a show that we would consider good, it doesn't mean that everybody in the audience likes it. So I'm glad that you did.
We watched it and we were like, oh, we're going to move here to LA and take all the improv classes. We're going to hit the ground running. This is going to be so fun. And I'll be honest, it took like a year and a half to sign up
Sure.
for improv classes.
Yeah, I totally understand. I don't know how many things in my life it's like I think about doing for years before I actually get around to them. So I totally understand. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've been doing improv now for 20 plus years.
Yes.
Your bio says you started taking classes at UCB in New York in 1999, and
Yeah.
then you caught the improv bug, went on to perform and teach at UCB, and then eventually ended up running the training center and school there. So, which is amazing. I really want to know, like, what made you want to sign up for that Improv 101 class back in 1999?
Yes. I was 29 years old when I took that class, and my profession was being a computer programmer. And before that, I had been like a journalist and a technical writer. I didn't have like a strong career. I'd kind of floated from thing to thing throughout my 20s, but it was all like cubicle corporate day job stuff. In the 90s, when the internet was new, you could sort of teach yourself very, relatively speaking, simple computer programming things and get a job as a quote computer programmer, which I did. I learned HTML and very simple JavaScript. But then I was sort of good enough at that stuff that I kept teaching myself a lot of languages and sort of became a more real computer programmer. But that was my 20s. And I the whole time I did that, I just missed creative people and funny people. It wasn't that I disliked my coworkers so much, but they just were people who wanted their lives to be really organized and normal and 9 to 5 and families at night and
stable. Yeah.
Stable. And I just, it drove me nuts. I was just like, I can't stand it. Like, you guys don't care about the movies that you watch, and you're not worried about your conversations being interesting, and you're not like, I don't know. I was bored a lot, and I had funny, creative friends in college and high school, so I missed it, and I had been a comedy fan. I probably didn't have the confidence to think of myself as an especially funny person, but I certainly was a comedy fan, and I just started dabbling. This was in Manhattan, so I would just go to open mics and do stand up. I would audit improv classes. I would watch a lot of comedy shows of all types that were just happening in New York. And I gravitated towards the improv classes. And when the UCB came to town, they came to town in 1996. I think I discovered them in like 1998 and really liked their shows and had heard through word of mouth that their classes were really good. And so I just signed up just really to be around creative people. That's what I wanted. I wanted like creative friends. And if I learned some cool skills as a bonus, great. And I had no aspirations of being a performer or a teacher. I just wanted to be good in the class and really just good enough that I just felt like I wasn't in the way. At first, that was my only goal, just to feel like I wasn't hurting the class.
That's always the first goal, I think.
Yeah. And the UCB at this time was a very small theater. There were not a ton of people doing it. Their main show, ASCAT, which was what the UCB themselves would perform, that was a very popular show that was sold out every week. But besides that, the theater, it was real hit or miss of whether there'd be a lot of people there. You could very easily see a show at UCB in those early days, and there'd be like almost nobody in the audience. And you could sign up for a class easily. I don't know. It was kind of wide open. So me and the other people taking classes at that time, the ones who really liked it, we would go see shows several times a week. We would then go out to the bars after with each other, sort of analyzing the shows. And I sort of pretty quickly got plugged into a generation of comedy fans and performers. And I mean, a lot of them are still my friends. And my life sort of became, for the first 4 or 5 years, just watching tons of comedy shows and just becoming an expert watcher.
Okay.
And I did really like doing it, but that was mostly just because I felt like it was sort of like working cool, like muscles in my personality or something like that. Like I liked what it was doing to my character. And it wasn't really until maybe 4 or 5 years in, like my mid 30s, that I started to think like, oh, maybe I could like audition for commercials or something, or maybe I could think of a way to do this more professionally. And I already felt so old to be doing it at, now I'm 52. I look back at my 35-year-old self and I was like, hey man, chill out. But I also can understand like 35 is kind of old to be like, maybe I'll start acting. Like it felt sort of nuts. It was very difficult to say with full commitment. It was pretty gradual. I loved being in improv classes and things built from there very gradually.
I love it. I'm right there in that age mark. I think I took my first improv class at 30 and 34, and just really jumping in and loving the improv scene and what it has done for me and all the skills I've learned and the people I've met. And it's just cool to hear that, I mean, you were able to make it work. I don't know if this is everyone's dream, but at least for me, when I first did improv like 101, I was like, I want to be an instructor and like just be in this world full time. Like, how cool would that be? And it's really hard to do that for sure. But you've made it work. You did it.
I did it. Yeah. Yeah. It's strange. I wouldn't have thought so for a long time. I mean, the improv world has expanded. Like, there are more ways to have it take over your life if that's something that you want. Like, there were there were like no full-time positions working for the UCB theater when I started taking classes there. And then that particular theater expanded into a large business. It has since contracted a fair amount since the pandemic. But it's still it's still a pretty big dog in the improv world. And not just UCB, improv in general kind of expanded a lot to where you're more likely to be able to find a theater that calls itself an improv theater in a lot of parts of the country. Even if those theaters are small, they were non-existent in the year 2000. And now, thanks to podcasts and the success of UCB, as well as Second City and IO and Groundlings, you can sort of find more improv theaters around.
So you said the first 4 to 5 years you were really just like an active student, active
Mhm.
watcher, just watching and learning as best you could.
Mhm.
When was the turning point where you decided you not only wanted to perform improv, but you also wanted to teach it and help others learn too?
Yeah, I got asked to teach and coach. I didn't seek it out. People asked me
Ah,
to coach
okay.
them. This also was a sort of side effect of it being a smaller community. So what happened was
Okay.
the UCB at that time, and they still do. They had house teams, right? That they called Herald teams, and so they would have like about 8 teams of 8 people each, and those 8 teams, 4 of them would perform every week. Yeah, it worked out about like that. And so if you got cast onto a team, then you were sort of like a regular performer at the theater. There were lots of other shows happening at UCB that were sort of each an individual project, but Herald Night was sort of the core of the theater. And if you were on Herald Night, then most of the UCB regular performers would learn who you were. Okay, like all of the teachers knew me. It's like, oh yeah, you're one of the people on Herald Night.
Okay.
Armando Diaz was the teacher who put me on Herald Night when I was pretty green, and I think other people were surprised by this choice at the time.
Ah,
Not totally shocked, but I doubt I was anybody's first pick for going
first
on.
pick.
Yeah. I mean, one of my good friends was like, "You got picked?" That's what he said, and I was like, "I know, I know." Um, it wasn't outlandish, but I was definitely like sort of I was put on when I was quite raw, and but that was the turning point that like kind of made me a contender for anything going on at UCB. Like now students might ask you to coach. You're on Herald Night. Hey, we like the way you perform. Would you coach us? Teachers could maybe ask you to sub. That was pretty rare, but it could happen. Somebody might ask you to tech their show or to have a small part in their show. Somebody might say, "Hey, could you
Ah,
read my sketches?" And just I'm asking a lot of people to read my sketches and just tell me what you think. You see a lot of shows here. How do you think this would go? So going from student to teacher was sort of like I became a house performer first, and then I was doing lots of little things like, oh, and then also there were shows outside of UCB that were starting to like crop up, like at little indie theaters. People would just rent a black box theater on their own. Their team would perform. They would invite 2 other teams, charge the audience like $5, try to break even on the rent. So I would get asked to do those indie shows a lot. Hey, do you want to bring a team? Do you want to sit in with my team? And then a lot of those were not just improv. There was improv and sketch. So friends of mine and I started writing sketches and doing sketches in these very kind of like low rent, zero budget places. And so all of that was mashed together. It was kind of like just doing the indie improv life, which
yeah, yeah.
was everything from being on stage at the ECB. That was kind of the biggest deal in New York at that time, from like going to a black box theater at 10:30 p.m. on a Friday night and doing a sketch for 6 people with your friends. And then maybe on Saturday getting coached by Billy Merritt. And then on Sunday, you're coaching level 2 people. It all
Right.
is together.
Okay.
And then like you do that for like a year or 2 or 3. And then I got invited to be a teacher. I got invited to be a sub. Well, I got invited to coach a Herald team. And then the Herald team
Okay.
recommended, and Julie Brister was on this team, and she recommended that I be considered as a sub to Kevin Mullaney, who was the guy in charge of the school. And Kevin had been my teacher and my coach. And he's like, "Oh yeah, Will might be good." And Kevin was like a amateur computer programmer, introvert, low energy dude. Like he related to me. I probably had a bias because
Yeah.
he and I were probably similar kinds of people. And so Kevin invited me to be a sub in 2004, early 2004. And then I got my first class the end of 2004. But that all was just kind of, I didn't really aggressively seek much of it out. What I was aggressively seeking out was I want to be doing improv and sketch however I can do it. And I want to try to
Yeah.
be getting better. I want to try to feel myself getting better. I also started doing stand up at that time. I started going to like open mics, and that was really just to make my improv better. But I would go to these like open mics, stand up open mics, which was a completely different world and a whole different like community of people who knew almost nothing going on at the UCB, especially in 2004. As the UCB got bigger, there was a little bit more overlap. But at that time, it was like you might as well be going to a different city. And some nights I'd be going to open mic stand-up stuff.
I want to take, my goal this year is to take a stand-up class so that it can help my improv and delivery and my public speaking too. It sounds like you didn't take a class, like you just jumped in and started doing open mic nights.
I have heard of some classes being really good, and that did seem helpful. I don't know why I didn't want to stand. Maybe there weren't any. Maybe there were not a lot just in my radar at that time.
Okay.
I guess I felt like open mics was the class. Like you would just go and watch and then try to do it and then watch the next week and try to do it. And whether you got any reaction at all was kind of like your grade, sort of.
Okay.
I maybe wasn't as invested either. I was okay with sort of bombing at stand-up. So I was like, well, didn't work. And whereas if I did bad on an improv show, I'd be crushed. So
yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, a question that us newbie improvisers deal with is, getting in your heads. You have a bad scene, a bad class, a bad show. I mean, what advice do you have for people who are starting out in maybe first 3 to 5 years of doing improv? You're still very much learning it. What advice do you have for people who are just in their heads?
Yeah. Well, it's something that every single person feels very strongly. I mean, that is a universal experience, feeling like you're in your head.
Good to know.
Kind of for like a while. I mean, like kind of every time you do it for like a year and a half, you're in your head to some degree, maybe longer. And then there's even a longer phase where sometimes you're not in your head, but then a lot of times you are, or you're in your head for part of the show, but then you're not. It never totally goes away. I still have, we had a smoke show 2 months ago where the January, we do a monthly show now. And the January show, January 2023, was a pretty good show, but I, for some reason, couldn't come up with anything. I just was real slow, and I didn't have a good feel for like how to help the scene. I didn't feel funny. And I was like, yeah, I'm thinking, and I could just tell that I was thinking about it too much. Now I've been in that position enough that I sort of wasn't freaked out by it. I just was kind of like, well, I'm not feeling it today. I better stay small and just like play it real. And I'm also on a team with real heavy hitter, extremely capable people. So if I fall back, it is fine. All I have to do is almost just repeat the facts that they are saying, and they'll be able to do something. Like literally they can just be like, we're bird watching, and I'll be like, good day bird watching. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know what else to do. And it'll be still all right. But I felt bad after that show, Do
you call it a funk, or you're just like, that one, like chalk it up to whatever, we'll get the next one?
Talk to a friend on the team. How did it feel for them?
Okay.
Did you notice, did this scene feel wonky to you? Or even just saying, man, I felt out of it. They won't, the friend I talked to in this case didn't feel out of it, but they have felt out of it at other shows. So they related. If they're a really good friend and you're on a team for a long time, they might say, yeah, I noticed you were holding back,
okay.
or I couldn't tell that you were feeling out of it. My teammates tend to be pretty supportive, so it's rare that any teammate would be like, here's some notes. It's more of a
I've got a list. I've got a scrolling list of notes for you.
Yeah. They're more just like pretty supportive assessment of where you've been at. So I'll do that. I also just like accept that I'm going to be feeling like shit all night about it. That I'm just going to be feeling bad, and like try not to wallow too deeply in it. And I'll just know that I'll feel a little better the next morning. But really the only thing that shakes it off is doing another show. That's the only thing that fully gets rid of it.
I think that's the thing when you're first starting in classes, like at least from my experience and being in the first like 1 to 3 years of improv, like your show is a big show. Sure, like no one's really in the audience, your friends are in the audience. It's a very supportive environment, but it might be one of your only shows that you do for a while. So it feels bigger. And so then if you mess up or you feel like you didn't have the show you wanted or whatever the
Yeah.
case is, you're in your head, you might not get an opportunity to have another show for a while, which I think is what you're saying, to get on those indie teams and just get on stage wherever you can. So that way your next show is soon and not like 2 or 3 months later.
Yeah, I mean that is I remember that, like not having a lot of shows. There's so much pressure on each one. It's like a vicious cycle because when you're starting off, you're playing with other people who are new to small
Yeah.
audiences, not that often. Each of those makes it difficult. And then as you get better and better, you play with better people more often to fuller houses, each of which makes it easier until, I don't know, it's weird. Like it's almost like the better you get, the easier it gets too for other reasons.
Yeah.
So
You
that's
just
kind of
got to be consistent, right? I mean, that's the lesson I'm learning here as you're talking, just consistency, keep going, get through that cringy part of like, oh, that was a cringy show. Let's do another one soon, kind of thing.
yes. So I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but I'll jump ahead. So I founded a school called World's Greatest Improv School, and I like names that are
Woohoo!
insanely audacious. I like names that are almost tongue-in-cheek, braggy. It's meant to be sort of a joke, but even if people don't think it's a joke, I kind of like it. Started that over the
Yeah.
pandemic as just an online thing, and then Jim Woods partnered up with me, and then we added Sarah Claspel to do in-person stuff. And when we started the in-person stuff, which was 2022, we put together teams for the first time, and we watched these teams do heralds, and most of these people hadn't really done heralds on a regular basis for a show. And so, we saw teams kind of take a step down from their ability because they weren't used to doing this kind of demanding form. Or maybe we were just seeing people who were new, right? Like the shows were sort of inconsistent. You'd see like a strong scene and then a weak scene. You'd see maybe a strong show one time and the next time they'd go up, it'd be a little weaker. But in the moments where Jim and I were watching the new teams do heralds and sort of struggling, I kind of loved it in a strange way because I'm like, this is how you get better. Like, this is how it happens. Like, you have to have the scene where you either don't know what to say or you say something and the audience is silent and you hate it and you're in the middle of it and you hate it and you don't quite know what to do, but you have some maybe guesses and you just try stuff. And like, that is how you get better. Like there is, or even better, a scene's going well and you make a move and you blow it. Like you go too
Yeah.
big or you go too silly or too sad. And you
Usually
feel
it's
it.
too sad or small. Yeah.
It could be.
For
I mean,
me.
there's lots of ways. I mean, over time, it'll be all kinds of different ways because, like, you'll overreact to the last bad thing you did. You'll be like, next time I got to be big and
Right.
happy. And then you'll come up big and happy, but it'll be too silly for the audience and too fake. Then you'll be like, I got to play it real. No one likes that. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to come out with a game. Nobody likes that. But sometimes they will like it, right? So, like, different things work at different times. But you start to get a feel for how real do I need to be? How silly do I need to be? How present do I have to be? And you start to just get a feel for it. I mean, it's more like learning how to, like, I don't know, balance on a bicycle. It's like riding a bike. If you've never done it, like you overthink every little thing and you're clutching the brakes and you refuse to go any speed at all. But then after a while, it's just a feel for balance. Like you can just tell when you have balance and when you don't, and you kind of know how to lean, and you're not calculating the moments as much as just you seek balance. And so, like, you do enough shows, you get a feel for what is too big, what is too small, what is too this, what is too that, and nobody can really teach it to you, except for shows is one of the main components. So when I'm watching students sort of have even just an okay show, I kind of love it. I mean, they don't love it. It's no fun for them, but I'm like, you want to get better? This is how you get better. Like, there is no shortcut. You have to go through this. Nobody has all good shows. Nobody. I've seen all of the best improvisers, and a lot of them I've seen from the moment they started. And even if they were impressively smart and funny right away, they were on they didn't know what to do to help shows. And they made shows worse and they were bad until they figured it out. Like that's just, there's no other way around it. You just have to do a certain number. And the teacher couldn't even, the best teacher could devote their life to making you better. And you still have to do a couple hundred bad shows. But you'll be getting better throughout it. There's no shortcut.
This is a good motivation to hear. And, I think I want that show like to be that like getting over the hump feeling of like, all right, I've made it now. And the bad shows are behind me and the bad scenes are behind me. Like I've conquered this. And I think that's really high expectations too. And I did this with like public speaking as well. Like I never had a speech where I was like, all right, cured of my fear of public speaking. Like it just kind of happened over time where I finally started to say, I love it. Like I love public speaking now.
Yeah.
Put me in front of people. I'll speak all day. But it wasn't one specific instance where I could pinpoint. And I think improv is going to be the same. Like there's no one show, one time where it's like, did it, done. I'm cured. I'm good at improv now.
Have you had scenes in classes or class shows that you've done that you liked like all right or even a lot?
I've had the all right feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had the all right feeling. I've watched classmates and been like, that's good stuff. But I don't know if I've had one like this is good stuff moment as my scene is going on yet.
Well, I think
yet.
Yeah. I think that's the first thing that'll happen is you'll just have some scenes where they just feel pretty good. Not even like they're beyond improvement, but just like, oh yeah, that felt pretty solid. Like that felt strong. I knew what to say. I felt good during it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that happens. I remember my very level 1 class show was doing a scene with somebody and we were sitting down and we were boyfriend, girlfriend. No, I was asking her character on a date for some reason. I think it was in the opening. But I remember that she said that she'd had sex with 300 people. Like that her character had had sex with 300 people. I think we were asking each other what our experience was. So she said 300. And big number, she's trying to make a big comedic choice. Well, I'm sure there's people who've had sex with 300, but she was definitely saying it like, look how big this number is.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember sitting there being like, what do I say to that? And I said, I was kind of stunned and I paused and I went, wow. And the crowd laughed at wow. And not like a lot or whatever, but like I remember registering like, yeah,
you were surprised. Yeah.
I was surprised that such a simple reaction got something from the audience. And I was like, oh, I just had to say, well, because my brain it briefly thought about maybe I should say that I've also had sex with 300 people. Like peas in a pot or something, like, oh yeah, me too. Like I have sex all the time. But I was so genuinely stunned by the number that I was like, wow. Then I think I said, I think I said something like, I would be intimidated to have sex with you. And I now regret asking you out. And that got a little bit of a laugh too. But even then I was already kind of posing it and kind of force and sound funny. And I could feel not being fake was like a big thing at first. Not sounding fake. But anyway, so like a little moment of just going, wow, and getting a laugh. That's like the beginning of an improv education. It's like, oh, they liked it when I just said, wow. That times 1,000 little moments like that, you start to just get stronger.
Yeah. I love that. Keep it simple too. Like, and trust your gut. Like that was your initial reaction. Go with that.
But I also remember trying, I remember sometimes trying things that were hard acting wise. Like I remember we got a suggestion of soccer and somebody started like with a British accent pretending to be dribbling a soccer ball, being like, come on, mate, we got to get on the pitch and like run up and down and, and I'd never done an accent of any kind. And I knew that I was going to be bad at it. I mean, I'm still bad at it, but my brain, this was in class and I was like, I have to like match him. Like I have to do it. Like, even if I sound stupid, it'll be too distracting if I don't do it. And he started it. So it's almost like I have permission to be bad. I didn't bring this up. Also, I didn't know anything about soccer. I didn't know what a pitch was. And I'm not athletic, so
Yeah.
it's hard for me to mime athletic things because I can't even mime what it would look like to kick a soccer ball. But I was like, I have to just do it, and I kind of don't worry about the scene being funny. I just want to be brave enough to do the British accent and try to do soccer talk. I think that scene went kind of badly from what I remember, but I felt proud. I felt well, I didn't back down. I did the hard thing.
Yeah, accents are hard for me too. So just hearing you talk in a British accent makes me a little nervous as well. See, I tried, and it's we got to work on that. We'll work on it.
Yeah, I think improv audiences, they like going for it rather than being great at it.
Mm-hmm.
They love vulnerability, I think. So if you're trying something sincerely and you're not quite doing it, they don't mind so much. Oh man, I remember now my very first Herald. I don't remember exactly how I blew it, but I was extremely nervous. I was in the third scene of the first beat, and I think somebody was asking how I felt about my sister getting married, but I thought I was the groom. And so then I thought I was getting married to my sister, but really he just meant that the couple was somebody else. And this was somehow related to the opening, but I couldn't remember the opening. So I mistakenly was I said, I feel weird marrying my sister. And it wasn't a fun mistake where the audience laughed. The audience felt bad for me that they could tell I didn't know what was going on, that I just had missed who were where. And I could feel everybody was worried about me. Also, it was my first show. Nobody knew who I was, except for my friend John Gemberling had come to watch, and he shouted my name when I came out on stage. He was like, "Will Hines," which made me feel extremely self-conscious.
Thanks, friend.
I mean, he meant it nicely. I also kind of liked it, but I felt self-conscious. But and I just remember having to kind of be tough and be like, all right, you blew your first scene. You have to you got to just get through it and kind of assume that nobody else will remember this but you, which I do. But
clearly, you still do.
Yeah. Having to be emotionally brave and manage your own insecurities is that's a part of it. You have to just be able to, really nobody else is paying attention to you. So you have to just, the other thing I noticed is that a lot of good people quit. A lot of good people are this is too hard, or I don't like playing with bad people, or this is frustrating, and they left, and I don't know where they are. And then a lot of people are I'm not quitting. I refuse to quit. And they are all doing it.
Was there ever a time where you got close, the insecurities were speaking loudly, you were starting to listen and kind of were dragging you to that, I want to quit phase, or were you more I'm on this path, I'm sticking with it?
Yeah, no, I thought about quitting around level 2. It was sort of so difficult for me that I was man, maybe I should just drop it. But I don't remember why. I didn't want to leave like that. I was I said, no, I still like it. I'm just embarrassed that I'm bad at it. So
okay,
it is still exciting to me. I just, in other words, it's not that it's not that it's a bad fit or that I'm not interested. I just am scared. And so I didn't want to quit for that reason. So I kind of I think I forbade myself from quitting for another 2 years. I was if they kick you out, if they tell you not to take another level, then I'll leave.
Do schools ever do that? I mean, don't they want your money for the classes, right?
Well,
to a certain point.
The groundlings very aggressively will tell you not to take another level.
For sure.
And
yeah, for sure.
When I was head of the school at UCB, I would occasionally tell people hey, you're never getting on a team.
Okay.
So don't write another check if that's why you're doing it. And they'd be like, what do you mean never? I'd be like, I can't say for sure, but it is not likely. And so don't give us your money if you think that's what's happening. If you're enjoying the classes, keep doing it. We also had
If
a
you
thing
have
where
an
you had,
end game in sight, then
yeah, I
yeah,
don't think
got
this
it.
theater is going to
Okay.
make your dreams come true. And I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, was that really my business to tell people? It was very rare that I would do it, extremely rare. But it was just if I heard them say they were broke and they were like writing checks for classes, I'd be like, maybe save your money. Like, just like,
Yeah, for
and again,
sure.
they're welcome to be in classes. But I was like, I don't want you to ruin your life over this. Or people getting extremely angry and upset that they weren't like moving up in the UCB hierarchy. I was like, man, do not depend on this place to make you feel good. It is not going to validate you. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know. Like I wouldn't have, if I didn't get asked to be a teacher or put on a team, I would have stopped doing UCB at some point. Not even angrily. I just would have been like, well, my time here is done.
I wanted to ask too, do you think you would have actively sought out teaching if you weren't pinged for it?
No, I don't think so. Like when I had that level 2 crisis, I remember this now, and I gave myself like 2 years. I think if I had done the 2 years and not made any forward progress, like just nobody was asking me to do indie teams, I wasn't feeling like I was doing any better, then I just would have kind of, washed my hands and been like, all right, that was a fun experience. It's time to move on. But
Interesting.
I did have some forward movement. I think it was getting on a house team. And then also people were asking me to coach. So I just felt like, and I was feeling a little better. I was like, I guess I'm getting better at this. 5 years into it, I remember, and somebody invited my Herald team to do a show at a bar, at a non-improv show, right? Like it's a very tough show for an improv team to like show up and do. But I
Yeah.
liked the challenge of it. So I asked my team, and only 3 of us showed up. It was me, it was John Gemberling, and I think it was this friend of mine, Rob Lathan. So the 3 of us went into the back of a bar to do an improv set. And I was so scared because I was like, I am not good enough at this to win over a room of strangers who are watching stand up. Like, that's a really difficult thing to do. And even though John Gemberling is truly one of the funniest performers I know, and he was there,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't think he's enough. And I remember I was like, well, this show is it's going to be an education. Like, we're just going to do it and we're going to learn something. And everybody in this room is going to hate improv after we do it, and they're going to hate us. But I was like, they're never going to see us again. I'm never going to see them again. I'm just going to do it and get out. And we did a not great scene to a mostly silent room, the 3 of us standing on an incredibly small stage meant for stand-ups.
I picture like the Silver Lake Lounge, like how they kind of have a tiny little stage in the back.
Yes, it's like half that size though.
Okay.
It was like we were standing on it. There was no room for anybody else to be on that stage. And it was like not great, but I don't know. I don't know how else you get better. Like I think our scene was 3 security guards arguing about something because we had to just stand there. But like, I remember still kind of feeling like that's making me better. And also I was like, I want to be the kind of person who's not scared of anything. Like, I'm just going to go and try it. I'll just go do it. And then, last year, 2021, me and Jim Woods did an improv scene at the Hollywood Improv Stand-Up Club on their lab stage.
I saw that on the lineup. How did it go amongst the stand-up crowd?
Good, I think. Good.
They were receptive of it.
Yeah, I thought we went over well. I thought we were strong. The lab they have a little bit more variety on that stage, so the expectations people are not totally surprised if it's not just stand up. But also, I was thinking back to that earlier thing from 15 years before, and I was like, okay, Jim, first thing we're doing is we're going to tell them what improv is before we do our scene, and that we're going to be making up a scene off of one suggestion, and we're going to tell them that we're only going for 5 minutes, and then we're going to do it. He was like, all right, man, whatever you want, playa. And I was like, and I think that helped. And I knew that Jim is one of the funniest people ever. And we did all right. So I don't know. It took me 15 years, but I did eventually get a good scene in a bar show.
That's a hard thing with the stand-up crowd. Just has different expectations.
Oh yeah, man. They hate improv. It's rough. It's rough.
It's all comedy, but it's different.
It's
And
totally. It's like dolphins and chimpanzees. Like they're just two totally different animals.
then from the performer standpoint, I love improv because you have a team. I know people do one person improv shows, which is just on a different level than my brain can fathom. But you usually have a team of support behind you. So if you're
Mhm.
failing or flailing on stage, they will come to save you. But stand up, it is really just you there. And that's hard.
It's
That's a very
totally.
hard thing.
Yeah, it's a totally different animal. I've done them both improv 1,000 times more than stand up, which I'm still really just a dabbler in. But yeah, they feel totally different. I like doing lots of stuff. I feel like it makes me better. I also don't totally mind failing if I know that it's a hard thing that I tried. I don't love failing when I'm supposed to be good. That feels bad. If I'm like, I should be good at this. But I don't know, even then, I've done improv shows this year for like very small audiences where it felt like a tough show. And I still feel like it makes me better. I think people in the audience feel worse than I do. They're like, these people on stage must be humiliated, how bad they're doing. And I'm like, and I feel like telling them, I've done this before. I don't know, like this happens sometimes. Like
I've been there, done that. Yeah. I've been
yeah,
there, felt that. I watched one of your the Improv Project shows recently, and it was a really long improv show. It was like an hour and a
yeah,
half long.
right. Yeah. Untitled Improv
And
Project. Yeah.
Untitled Improv Show, yes, at Dynasty Typewriter. And it was extendedly long for improv. And I
Yes.
love
Yes.
improv, but to the point where you all were like, well, I guess we have to call our own blackout. Someone do something funny so we get a blackout here.
Yeah.
And I just loved that you all didn't panic. Like you called it out and it was funny. And no one was like, oh, we've been going on too long. You made it fun. That was the lesson I got out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so long. There was just a miscommunication over how the show was supposed to end. Um, and I truly do not believe I was supposed to call the out. And I bring that up because I sometimes worry. I catch myself appointing myself show captain when nobody else asked me to be that, and worrying about how long the set is and where the lights are and stuff and all that thing. And I was like, Will, that is not your job. If nobody asks you to worry about how long the show is, then you don't worry about it. If nobody tells you to worry about getting the suggestion, then you don't worry about it. So I didn't. I just did exactly what I was asked, and we were in the middle. And I was the first one who brought it up. Still, I was in the audience as a character, and I was like, "Hey, anybody know how long this show's supposed to go on for?" Like I said it in character. So I guess I broke my own rule. I still was worried about it, but I literally was like, "Is nobody else worried about how this show's going to end?" And because everybody else on stage was an improv veteran, they knew they had been the kind of person who called their own show and stuff, but nobody did it. And it was almost like a game of chicken. Like nobody refused to end the show. Then finally we got a blackout from the booth. But I think maybe the person in the booth didn't think they were supposed to end it. And I just was like, yeah, this show's way too long. This show's too long by 45 minutes. It's too long. But I was like, it's not my problem. I have to not be the boss of it. That was my own little journey. It was just like, I'm only a performer.
Yeah, is that your teacher side of you? Because you're constantly helping students, like you're usually calling their blackouts and stuff. So when you're on stage, you're like, okay, I'll help, or I don't know. I'm like, I have that kind of type A little bit sometimes that I have to let go of control.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's because of being a teacher. I think it's that I'm just a little bit of a control freak and I want things to go the way I think they should go. And sometimes I just can feel that instinct is wrong and I have to let it just not control things and be cool with it maybe not going the way I think it should go. And you ever have a thing where somebody's explaining something to somebody, you overhear it, and you want to jump in and explain it for them because you feel like they're not explaining it properly? I have
Yeah.
that
Oh,
urge,
yeah.
and I've taught myself to be like, if they didn't ask you to explain it, don't do it. Like, let them; they'll be fine. And then there's times when it is my job. If I am the teacher of a class, it is my job to explain how the show's going to, or if I'm the producer of a show or something. So I don't know. Show went too long. That's how it goes.
It was very memorable, though, length and content wise. So
Yeah.
it was a great show.
Yeah, but
Lots
a
of
lot
good
of that,
lessons learned.
I loved lots of that show. I was watching Tim Baltz in that show and how well he just committed to all his characters. And I was like, oh, he's really, I mean, I have no idea what his internal process was, but he did not seem to be thinking about premise or idea. He just seemed to be thinking about his person and
Mm-hmm.
playing his person. And I was like, oh, I love the way that feels. I wonder if I could do that more. So
Yeah.
I was trying to learn stuff too.
Excellent. That's cool that you do that as well. And just looking back on your journey, 20 plus years in improv, I mean, how can you say that improv and comedy has helped you throughout the years?
I mean, it is my whole life. It, like everybody I'm friends with, my sense of identity is all wound up in it. The things I'm most proud of as achievements in terms of emotional victories and getting better and how I relate to the world. So that's one. Two, it did let me, it reversed a lot of like emotional defenses. Like instead of,
Oh, yeah.
ironically, getting into improv comedy made me worry less about being funny in everyday life. Like I let go of trying to be funny in everyday conversation because I sort of learned there's nothing less funny than trying to be funny. And it's better
Mm-hmm.
just to go wow when something wows you. Just say wow. So I think I try a lot less hard to be impressive, and I just kind of assume that people will notice if they're going to notice. I mean, I should say I have a deep desire to be seen as smart and funny by every single person who interacts with me, and
Hence the
I
name World's Greatest Improv School. Yes.
yeah, and I used to try a lot harder in my 20s, and I think improv made me stop trying so hard. Like just be cool with whatever people are going to think of you, and if they think you're funny, they do, and if they don't, then they're missing out, and it's not my problem. And just being present and not trying to plan ahead and just not solving problems before they happen, not trying to solve problems that haven't happened yet, and just doing whatever is at hand. Like I didn't, when I took my first improv class, I can't remember now. Maybe part of me wanted to be a teacher or be on a team. I'm sure I at least wanted to be on a team, but it wasn't something that was an imminent thing that I worried about. I was just like, how do I be good in this class? So I think improv may be more present minded,
Yeah.
value authenticity, vulnerability. Like a lot of, I think, kinds of comedy make you try to be stronger and faster than everybody, and improv encourages you more to be like more yin, like a bit more just like passive and watching and waiting for it to come to you and then reacting to it.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
more like a pinball game, like the ball comes to you and then you flip. You're just a flipper in the pinball game, and you're not like a basketball player who has the option of taking it from wire to wire. You have to just wait. It may be more passive in a nice way, I think.
Yeah, for those of us who are a bit more on the control freak side,
Mhm.
I certainly land there too. It definitely helped me to let go of perfection. And, I'm very new in my journey, but I could just see how the skills really help benefit in my career and also in my just overall life. I see an immense change in myself. And I'm doing the hard work, and improv is kind of helping me, has been the catalyst for that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had that happen for sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to take the quickest, smallest, little small break here, and I want to talk a little bit more about WGIS. You brought it up before. I want to dive a little deeper into it. So
Okay.
we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right. And we're back talking with Will Hines, the world's greatest improviser, head of the world's greatest improv school, helping others to become world's greatest improvisers themselves. And Will, I've just been curious about WGIS and the startup because I certainly joined. I took classes online during the pandemic. You started it during the pandemic, right?
That's right.
And what was the initial startup like? I mean, so for me, whenever I'm starting something new, this podcast, my side business, I get really caught up in all the things I have to do and I get anxious and I'm a little type A, like I gotta be a perfectionist. It's gotta be all done right the first time. That's a heavy lift to start an improv school during the pandemic. So what was that lift like when you first started?
Oh yeah, it was baby steps. You know what happened was my cat got sick and my vet was like,
Oh
she's got
no.
cancer, and she did pass on. She was 17 years old. She was an elderly cat.
Oh.
But the vet's like, the only thing left is chemo, and that costs $1,000 a week. And I was like, woof. I think I can't do it. And then I sort of just, this was March of 2020. I was like, well, everyone's going inside right now. Maybe I'll just post a bunch of online classes, and if I can make $1,000 a week, I'll do the chemo. So I put up like 5 workshops, and they all sold out like instantly.
Nice.
So I did it for 2 months. My cat died. She had a very healthy first month, like a bright and happy month, and then sort of a decline, and then it just wasn't working.
Oh.
I'm sorry to bring up such a sad thing, but this is how it happened. Like,
Yeah.
but then I had 5 classes going. It was my second round of 5 classes. And then everybody in them was like, are you going to do another level? We all want to do another level. We want to stay doing this. And so, I was stressed out because I was like, how do I accommodate? What do I do? Do I just make a level and then sign all the same people up, or what? It was very disorganized, but I just put a bunch of classes up, and then I built a website. And for the first year, for 2020, it was really just me doing it. And then I asked a couple people to substitute when I couldn't make certain classes because it was such a busy load.
Yeah.
And I got Brandon Gardner and Beth Appel, and then later Jim Woods and Sarah Claspel and other people. But it was still mostly me. So it was really just baby steps. And then I was enjoying doing it. And so then I wanted the people to be able to perform. So I set up online shows. So I set up teams.
On Twitch.
On
Twitch and stuff.
Yeah. Twitch is, a lousy place certainly to watch improv, and it's not that much better to do it. But this was the only option at the end of 2020.
Right.
And it was just like, okay, these will be free shows. No one's getting paid to do them. It doesn't cost me anything to put them up. I organized teams and I had coaches. Then the pandemic started to lift and in-person things started happening. And Jim was like, let's do in-person stuff. Jim was really excited about it. And I was like, well, if you'll help me, I do it. I don't want to do it all by myself. And so we just started trying to transfer the online experience to in-person. So it was just sort of like one step after another. My very first batch, I had a website that was willhinesimprov.com.
Okay.
And then that was like March, April, and May. And then like by June, I was like, I don't like my name in the brand. And I already had a book that I had written called How to Be the Greatest Improviser on Earth. And that was like a very tongue-in-cheek name. I was like, what would make a book sell? Like, I'll just promise the moon in a way that I hope it's obvious that I'm being jokey. But since I had that book, I was like, maybe I should. My friend Connor Ratliff said, you should just call it World's Greatest Improv School. Like, you should just keep going with this like insane branding. And I was like, you know what? I like it. It's funny. So I got another website, WG Improv School, and moved everything over there. And it was really just sort of baby steps. Like, if at any point the demand fell off, I just would have stopped. That's still kind of true. Like, if we just post classes and nobody wants them, then I'll be like, well, that's the end of this adventure. That's the way it goes. That hasn't happened yet, but I think that's how the UCB started too. Like, they moved to New York and started selling classes, and they just sold like crazy because they were such good improvisers. And then they decided to make a theater.
That was one of my questions of like, where do you see this WGIS or Weegis? Some people pronounce it differently.
I like it. I call it Weegis also. I like the awkward acronym and the weird pronunciation of it.
WGIS reminds me of a news studio. I always this is Channel 4, WGIS on the scene.
Yeah.
That's what makes me think of.
True.
Where do you see this Weegis journey headed for you? As long as people keep signing up for classes. Hint, everyone listening, keep signing up for classes.
We're sort of looking for a physical space, although I haven't really done any legwork on that. But the next space would be the next step would be to get a physical space so we could put up as many shows as we want and to have a home base. And we are looking to do that, but I'm sort of looking kind of slowly. Like I'm kind of letting it take a while because that is such a big step, and that involves like sinking money into stuff and then kind of being on the hook. And I'm
Yeah,
ready
for
for that,
sure.
but I'm ready for that, but I don't need it to happen like immediately. And so we're kind of looking around for that. But the part that I like is the community. I like having a community of people get to know each other and become familiar with each other and see each other perform and ask each other to do things outside of classes like that. I want more of that. Like I would love, that's why it'd be fun to have a space. It'd be nice to have a night of jams, night of stand up, night of improv
Mm-hmm.
house teams, a night of senior teams, and that just that you could a little world for people to get to know. Like I really like that about UCB when I found it was that like you could go 4 or 5 nights a week and you'd see other people going a lot and you'd become friends with those people, and I really dug that. So I would where it's going is I would like the community aspect of it to keep getting stronger. And we're still doing online stuff too. There's a small but fervent online portion of it.
Which is great because, I mean, really, pre pandemic, there wasn't a whole lot of access to this world of improv, the LA scene, the New York scene. You didn't really have access if you didn't live there. And now, people get to join from all over the world, which is pretty cool. Like the Facebook community, the Facebook group you have, the WGIS community,
Yes.
people post on there.
Yeah. That's pretty good. We have a Discord chat server, which I didn't even really know what Discord was when I started all this, but it is a bunch of basically a series of message boards where you can start your own. And so there is a WGIS chat server, which essentially it's a message board. And there's a small but passionate group there. I like those things. We have a Twitch channel that's got like a fair number of followers, not I think like 1,000, but like,
Nice. Yeah.
and yeah, and as I would love to shore all of the stuff up and beef it up, and it requires maybe somebody to help me organize stuff.
I liked how when you started, you would post on the group, hey, I posted this class and, I've updated the website. Can anyone let me know if you see any bugs or features that are off? Like, I really appreciated that because it was not like, hey, this thing is perfect. Like, I recognize this has maybe some
Yeah.
issues and we'll get to them when we see them kind of thing. That's a good lesson for me.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. I should be asking for feedback more, but it is helpful when you ask the people who are doing it, what do you like? What don't you like? Sometimes you can't do anything about that feedback, but it's good to know.
Yeah, I just appreciated how like authentic it was. Like, hey, I posted this and the times were wrong, or like the formatting of the times were wrong, and people let you know. And you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
can fix that. You know,
Yeah.
it's like I don't have to be perfect to launch this thing. We'll be agile and figure it out as we go, kind
Yeah.
of like improv.
People are pretty understanding about it. I mean, it helps when you're small and they know you're small. Like they don't take things as it's, when a huge institution screws up, it almost feels like a personal affront. But when like a guy posts something wrong on his website, you're like, hey guy, you fix this. And they do. And it's
That's true. That is true.
yeah.
Well, and I took Jim Woods' first class in person, and
Yeah.
really it was like my second class of all time in person because most of my improv journey was online. I had one 101 class in person, and then the pandemic hit. And I have to say that class, Jim's class, always will have a special place because
Oh.
it was hard. It was weird being in person. I think our first two classes, like Jim was like, "Hey, you can do scenes standing up. Like you don't
Mhm.
have to sit." Because we're so
Yeah.
used to Zoom, like sitting
Yeah.
and talking. He's like,
Yeah.
why don't we do scenes where we have to stand? No one can use the chairs for a while.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I think, yeah, we loved it. We kept asking him, like, "Will you do a part two?" And he did, and just kept going. We did the classes in Molly Malone's bar.
Yeah.
Early hours before the bar opened. So, like that's
Right.
the roots of WGIS, which
Yeah,
is fun.
that was one of the first in-person classes for sure. I remember.
Yeah, we didn't even have a show. It just was like, let's get everyone back to just being in person here,
Yep.
which was so helpful.
I remember. Yeah, it was really exciting. I was doing one at the clubhouse at the same time.
And we formed a team from that class, which we're still like practicing. We haven't really performed much, but one of the guys in our group likes to say, like, we were the first WGIS team to start because we formed from Jim's first class.
That's probably right. Probably the first in-person team for sure.
Yeah. So shout out to Passion Fruit Laser Blaster. We're still getting on the indie scene, but we were the first WGIS. We'll claim that spot. How about that?
I'll back you up on that. I think that's right.
Thank you. Will, I just have to ask, you do stand up.
That's correct.
You act, you do improv, you do sketch, you do lots of podcasts. You're a podcast guest. You do music with your band, Wayne and Rodney. Is there any creative outlet that you won't try at this point?
I mean, I like making stuff, so they're all just things where you can start a project and finish it in not too long a time. Song, stand-up routine, improv scene. There's no novel writing on there.
You've written a book. I forgot to mention author too. Let me add that to the list.
Although that started as a blog, so that was just like blog entries that I then compiled into a book. I mean, I did a fair amount of revising and stuff, but it started as blog entries.
Very cool. Okay.
So I'm both proud and ashamed of creative output because it feels self-indulgent. You know what I mean? It just feels like, well, yeah, I enjoy looking at the inside of my butthole in a variety of mediums. But I don't know. I like making stuff. I like reading and listening to music and looking at art. So I also like trying to make it. It's like another way to be closer to it. I mean, the musical stuff is really not my forte. Like my friend Joel Spence, who I do Wayne and Rodney with, is really talented. And I wrote some songs and I was like, can you help me record these songs? I like the melodies of them. And he's like, we'll just do it. We'll just be a band. Let's just do it. So
I love it.
Yeah.
What does the name Wayne and Rodney come from?
I live on Wayne and he lives on Rodney. Those are streets in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. Nice. I was like, are those middle names? What's the story behind that?
Yeah.
Well, and I think we kind of talked about it, but I mean, you dabble, you do all this stuff. You have to be a beginner at some point. Like, how do you handle being a beginner in these creative outlets?
It is tough, but it makes me a better teacher, I think, to remember what it's like to be bad at something and to be dependent on a teacher's guidance and praise or patience or just wanting another chance to try something again or to be able to move on from something that's hard, but also the challenge of being given something hard, like all that mixture. It is tough to be a student again. It's tough.
Yeah, but it helps with growth. That's the way I look at it.
I think so. It keeps your brain nimble to be doing something that it's bad at. I hope so. I feel pretty youthful and pretty energetic. And I think part of it is learning lots of new things, just starting from zero and being willing to look a little dumb, maybe more than a little as you start.
I love that. Yeah. And, the comedy side, the laughter, certainly I think will help keep you young at heart.
Yeah.
Too.
I also like things where you can do them not in a theoretical way. Like, okay, an improv scene, you're doing it, the audience laughs or they don't. Stand-up routine, you do it in front of a crowd, they laugh or they don't. A book, you write it, self-publish it, people buy it or they don't. In other words, it's not just like in a college class where you're doing it in a hypothetical sense. You're like truly doing it for its purpose to see if it works or not. And I like that a lot. Like, even the band, like we write songs, I wanted to like put them on Spotify and iTunes, and just so that theoretically we are releasing music for real people to listen to. Almost nobody does. We knew that going into that would probably happen, but like I liked being in college and learning lots of different things, but I didn't like that it was all like pretend. You do something and your teacher just says whether it's good or it's bad. And I was like, I mean, that was helpful and it was interesting, but let's do it for real. Let me write a book and publish it and I'll see how it does. And it's done pretty well.
How do you handle the or not side of things? Like, okay, they either listen or they don't. They buy it or they don't. How do you
Right. So
handle
like
if it ends up in the don't category?
well, I've done a lot of podcasts and almost none of them have been a hit. Almost none of them have really had a big audience.
How many have you done? Do you even like, how many have you
That I've
started?
like founded and stuff or co-founded.
Yeah.
Me and this guy, John Frusciante, did the UCB comedy podcast back in like 2011.
Early days of podcasting too.
Yep. And then I did Don't Get Me Started with Anthony King, where we'd interview our friends about not their job. Then I did Screw It, we're just going to talk about the Beatles. And then my brother wanted to do Screw It, we're just going to talk about comic books. We did that. We are still doing that. Me and Pam Murphy started one called I Will Write Your Book, where it was an improvised character podcast. I almost started one called Emergency Podcasts, just for my random leftover podcast ideas, but I decided not to because it felt dumb. And
5.5.
yeah, so that many, yeah.
So, you get whatever it is, like it falls into like the don't. Like you're not
Right,
getting
so
the
like
listenership.
Don't Get Me Started, we really liked doing, but Anthony we were both getting busy and it was harder to schedule. And it was
Okay.
becoming a chore. And we didn't have huge listener numbers. We had a loyal but small fan base, but it wasn't like big. You'd hear about like the Doughboys would start a podcast and it would become a national sensation, and like Blank Check would be a movie podcast and have a huge following. And then me and Anthony would get like 3,000 listeners an episode, which wasn't nothing, but it wasn't like big.
That's,
Like
yeah.
I mean, it was a lot. We were happy with it, but it was a level where it's like, well, we've done this for 2.5 years. It's not getting any bigger. Maybe this is just time to walk away. And I Will Write Your Book got like 300 or 400 listeners an episode, like really, really not a lot. And
Yeah.
we did that for a year. And then I was like, man, this isn't working. Like, let's just, we learned something. Let's move on. It's just an education. Me and my brother do our comic book one. We get like 3,000 listeners an episode, but really we're doing that because we're friends. So it is irrelevant, our listenership, sort of, because it's just for me and him to talk about something. The Beatles podcast, we don't do it on a regular basis. We do like 2 or 3 episodes a year. It's just because we love talking about the Beatles when there is a Beatles related event, which weirdly does happen like 2 or 3 times a year.
Even
for a
still.
band that broke up in 1970 and half the members are dead. There is still a pretty big Beatles event or that happens like twice a year somehow. And so we'll do an episode on it.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was a pretty big deal when Disney Plus launched the.
Yep, we did 2 episodes. We did a preview and then we did after watching it.
Nice. I'll have to go and listen to that.
It's 4 hours. I think it's for hardcore people only.
You can get a lot of chores that you could clean your whole house.
Yep.
While listen to it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what I like to do. I'll either exercise or clean or do chores. And
I like going on a
the
big long walk. I like getting a big bottle of water, going on a long walk, and like listening to them.
Yeah, you could do a whole half marathon walk with that episode there.
Yep. I listen to podcasts at double speed though, so it's insane.
Yeah.
If they're not playing, if they're playing music, I listen to it at normal speed. But if there's not music playing, I listen to it at double speed, which sounds crazy, but
very efficient.
I can do it. Yeah.
And then when you listen to it normally, you're like, why are they talking so slow?
Yeah, why? God, it's taking forever.
Speed it up. Come on, hurry up.
Yeah.
It sounds like you just managing the energy. Like when it feels like, okay, like this is played out or it feels like a chore, let's try something new. And for you, there will always be something new to try, it seems.
Yeah, I'm always ready to, I like doing a lot of different stuff.
Is there anything on your list? We're recording in early 2023. Like any goals that you want, something new you want to try this year?
I want to do a half-hour stand-up set that is
good. Half hour.
I've done a half-hour stand-up set a couple times. And
that's a lot of material.
Yeah. I was relatively happy with them for never having done them before, but I just want it to be better. So I'd like to do a half hour where I feel like it's actually fun the whole time. I don't know if I'll be able to do that, but I think about it a lot. I'm like, how can I get a half hour where it's just me and a microphone?
How do
I
you
don't
take your notes? Are you like, do you have a notebook always with you? You type it on your phone when you think
type
of
it on my
something?
phone. Type it on my phone.
Yeah,
Simple note. That's what I have.
got it. Nice. My
Yeah.
problem is I'll think of things late at night and then I'll
Oh
be like,
yeah.
oh, I'll remember in the morning. No, I don't. I won't
Yeah.
remember in the morning.
Yeah. You
It's
got
a
to write them
memory
down.
problem again.
That's you never remember nighttime memories in the morning. You got to write them down. It's
You got to
weird.
write them down.
Yeah.
Put them in the phone, write them down. You've got to.
hmm
Well, Will, this is last question for you. This is an improv podcast, and
Okay.
I know you usually do a lot of character improv podcasts where you play someone, but today you played yourself,
Yes.
and I appreciate you doing that. And improv is all about yes and, of course, that's one of the number one rules. How do you embody a yes and or growth mindset in your life?
If people ask me to do something, I try to do it. I mean, it's not a hard rule, but like if I get asked to do something that fits under the realm of like new adventure, new experience, I try to do it, even if I don't want to. Go on a hike, go watch a band, go to a party, go see a movie, meet up with people that I haven't seen in a while. I try to do it. I try to say yes
You
in
don't always
some
want to do
fashion.
those things?
I
Or
don't
just
always want to
sometimes
do
it's
those
like,
things. Or
okay,
maybe it's a
okay.
bad time, maybe it's like really busy and
Sure.
I'll try to do the
You got to
thing rather than not do
recharge.
the thing. Yeah.
Got it.
So, yeah, I try to do that.
Try to say yes when you can.
Yeah, I try to say yes to real life adventures. Small letter A adventures when they get offered to me and responsibilities.
Well, I appreciate you saying yes and to this podcast. This has been my kind of personal journey podcast. Didn't really start with that intention, but it's kind of
Mhm.
turned into I'm not a writer. Like I just don't have the patience or the good writing skills to do a blog. But this is my audio blog of my improv journey at this point. And I appreciate you being on and sharing some tips. I think that can help anyone in their improv journey. And it certainly helped me today. So I
Oh,
appreciate that.
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And well, I lied. There was one more question for you.
Okay.
This is, I think, one
Liar.
of the
So you're a
easiest
liar.
ones. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
um, where and how can our listeners find out more about you?
Best place to stay on top of Will Hines Enterprises is my Instagram account, which is Willie B. Hines, WILLIEBHINES. I usually, anything big I got going, I'll plug it on there. And then as a backup, you can go to my website, willhines.net, which has kind of a list of things I've done before, if you're curious about digging deep that way. Yeah.
And you're on TikTok now too, huh?
I do TikTok now.
Dabbling in the TikTok.
I dabble in TikTok, yeah.
I'm still working on that.
I'll just post one, and most of the time they get no reaction at all, and I just have to be all right. I guess that's the way it goes.
And that's, I think, the enjoyment factor. Like, if you enjoy it, it doesn't matter how many look at it, listen, whatever. It's the enjoyment of it. I mean, we're recording this early 2023. Any like big shows coming up to plug? I know you're always in shows around the LA area.
I think Jim Woods and I are starting a monthly sort of like sketch and character show that's going to be the first weekend of it, the first Saturday of every month at this theater called PDA, Public Display of Altadena. So we are still in talks over what we're going to do with the slot, but it's some sort of performance. There'll be something sketch-ish or character-ish or audience interaction-ish. We're still trying to figure out. It's some kind of Will and Jim comedy creation.
Will and Jim Variety Hour?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, cool. I look forward to seeing more about that.
We don't even have a name for it.
Yeah, I will look forward to seeing the name and more about it.
Yeah.
I am definitely one that I have to take a sketch class in order to keep me writing, which eventually I'll grow out of that. But I'm in that phase. Like I need the deadlines to write sketches and stuff. So that's on my list too, to take more sketch classes this year.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I predict you like them.
Yes. Yeah. And also that like the character sketches for shows like that would be cool to see on stage.
Yeah, I'm hoping it'll be good.
Will, eternally grateful for you coming on. Loved listening to your background story. I'll be honest, I have your book, The
Oh, thank you.
World's Greatest Improviser. I have not read it yet, I will admit, but I'm getting shelf mosis. Stephen read it. My husband read it, and he
Im-
really
i- i-
enjoyed it.
i- Improv books are so hard to read. I read like 20 or 30 of them when I was writing, and they're a weird little animal. And they're when the time is right, you'll read it.
Yeah.
There's no sense in rushing it. And I
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate you getting it anyway. Thank you for getting it.
yeah, and I think it's giving me shelfmosis. Even though I haven't read it, I'm getting shelfmosis from it.
I like that.
That's what I like
that
to
word.
think. The UCB
Yeah.
manual also shelfmosis.
I agree. I love that term.
Will, thank you, thank you, thank you again. Loved hearing your journey. Can't wait to see the journey that WGIS or Weegis is on. And I will be there taking classes in full support because I just love the community you've grown. So thank you for everything.
Thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I really appreciate Will sharing his story from the beginning because sometimes we see these amazing performers and improvisers on stage and we just think, oh, they're so good at improv that they've just been good at it forever. Like they must have just always been good at improv. And hearing Will's story, it's a reminder that he's had to work at it. He's had to grow and learn. And he never went into it with the mindset of like, this is going to grow into this big thing. He just wanted to do something creative outside of work, which I think is really inspiring that he just wanted to try something and then look where it's led to. Like this is his life, it's his job, it's his whole being now as an improviser and helping others become great improvisers as well. I love the term and the name World's Greatest Improv School. Becoming the world's greatest improviser. I know it's prestigious and a bit far fetched, but I love that he's going for it and he's doing a fantastic job with building the Weegis community. I have taken several classes. I was really excited about the in-person classes when they first started offering them, and I've took a bunch of classes from Jim Woods, and I actually haven't taken a class with Will yet, and that's on my list. I need to. So if you are interested in doing improv or you haven't taken it in a while or ever, definitely look on the schedule for when Will's taking a class because you will get a lot out of it, of course. You will get a lot out of any teacher because Will has curated this amazing list of instructors and teachers at Weegis or World's Greatest Improv School. So you really can't go wrong there. And this reminds me that I need to sign up for some more classes too. I've kind of gone a different direction in improv and kind of leaned more into musical improv, and I'm really enjoying it. So, a lot of my training at UCB and even at Weegis has been about performing the Herald, which is kind of the quintessential improv form. If you can do the Herald, you can do any other improv format and crush it. And the Herald is really hard to learn, and it takes years and hundreds and thousands of practices and shows to do it right. And I enjoy the format and the form of the Herald. However, I was doing it a bunch and I wanted something different. So I've actually been exploring musical improv a lot this year. And so I just haven't been taking as much Herald classes and stuff. And I feel like I'm getting rusty in that. So this episode has been a really good reminder. I need to take a Herald class every now and then just so I keep at it and can still do it. And I don't become super rusty where I'm like, oh God, what's next? And how do I do second beats again? And I kind of feel like that now. So I will be checking the Ouija schedule and I encourage you to do the same. I put all the links in the show notes, so definitely check it out. I also love that Will is just always creating things. Like, he has so many podcasts. He has a band with Joel Spence, and they put their music on Spotify. He's trying stand-up. He's experimenting with different things with Jim Woods and the PDA show that he's doing. So I admire that in him, and I'm really inspired by people who just love to create for the sake of creating. I think it really helps you grow as a person when you can just create and not get so much in your head that you're like, why am I doing this? And this is dumb and this is stupid and no one's going to like this. And it's like, well, do you like it? And if you like it, then that's all that matters. Just keep going and creating. I understand that if you are creating for the sake of a profit or for your business, then yes, you certainly want to hit different metrics. But if you're just creating for fun, just keep going, just keep doing it. And let those judgment zones in your head just kind of melt away so you can keep creating. I know I kind of fangirled out a bit at the beginning, but at the time that I'm releasing this episode now, I have hit 5 years living in LA. So I've been in LA now for 5 years. And doing this episode with Will, who I saw perform right before I moved to LA when we were planning out where we were going to live and we were doing our relocation trip. Like, I remember watching that show and going, oh my God, they're so funny. I want to be on that stage. I want to work to be like them. I want to work to get on that stage. And while I haven't made it to the UCB stage, I have a long way to go. But I've gotten the chance to work with Jim and Will and train with them and learn from them. That's amazing. They're some of the funniest improvisers and human beings on this planet. And, who's to say that if COVID didn't happen, I don't know if Will opened his own company and, improv training school. Who knows? But, that's an alternative reality that we don't get to live and we don't get to know. And so COVID did happen. And unfortunately, his cat got cancer. So he had to find a way to make the money to pay for the cancer treatments. And so he started Weegis and he started the school, and it's grown and blossomed. And it's given us as like small time improv students the chance to meet some of our improv heroes. And I know Will would probably be like, oh, improv heroes, don't call me that. But he is to a lot of people. Anyone who watches his shows and anyone from the Smokes and other amazing Herald teams, you watch these people on stage and you're like, they're so good. I want to get to that level. And it's just been great to have Will kind of be on like the cutting room floor helping improvisers get there. I'm so appreciative of Will and Jim and everyone at the Weegis School for helping improvisers become the world's greatest improvisers. And I've learned so much from them over the past 2 years or so. And one thing that Will said around the beginning when he was first telling his story is that he was feeling something was missing at work. Like, he was doing work and it was fine, but he was missing the fun and the creativity, and kind of looking at his coworkers and going like, you don't appreciate the movies and the comedy and the creativity from the movies. And, he just didn't align and match with his coworkers, and he felt like something was missing. And I'm summarizing here from his words, but this is what I took from it, is that something was missing from work. And so he went and tried an improv class and really liked it. And of course, we know how that journey transpired after that. So I want to ask you, do you feel like something is missing, whether at work or in your personal life? Like, you're just kind of like, like, I like what I do, but I miss this aspect. Or I used to be really funny in high school. I used to paint. I used to draw. I used to be really creative, and I'm not doing that anymore. What aspect of creativity are you missing right now? And how can you get back to doing it? So that's my question for you today, that's kind of my big takeaway from this conversation is like, Will just recognized that something was missing and he went and tried a class, and then boom, he's like, it's his life now. And you just never know what can happen until you try something. And it's not to say that you have to turn it into a career or anything bigger than just a creative endeavor. But I think if you don't try, you'll always feel that void or that sense of like something's missing. That like, I wanted to try this, but I was too scared to ever try. So, what's that thing and how can you try it? Sign up for a class, just start doing the thing. What is it? And maybe we can fill that void and fill it up with creativity and passion again. I'd love to hear from you and what you thought of today's episode or what you thought about that void or something missing. I'm always happy to chat and hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to me on social media. I'm on Instagram at Improvly Speaking. That's improv, L-Y, speaking. I'm also on LinkedIn at Dana Gowan. You can email me at Dana, Dayna, at improvryspeaking.com. And you can check out my website, improvryspeaking.com, for more details of what I'm doing and creating over here in my own little space. Thanks again for listening today and joining us. I hope you enjoyed it, and go out and flex your creative thinking. I'll talk to you next time.